The poem is called Counsel. Ariure. How do we build a city? A safe refuge for many people. A place where many people, a place of many places, where many people wish to dwell, when the many may have many ideas about the city, the people, and the places the place might become. So many that at times it can tear them apart, pulling at the fibers till the fibers start to fray. To what had felt whole and truthfully woven begins to look ragged, and not just around the edges, where the words that once carried music in their meaning have ceased to carry anything at all. What then can we do to bring it back together, to bind the many pieces without the pieces feeling bound? In ancient Tamil Nadu, land of Tamar, the great kings of 3 kingdoms on their errors, praising them to listen and then act. So listen, listen, listen to the people, to their pains and to their plans, and to the voice great within us, rising up and rising out, showing us the next step, the next way, the next word, the next wonder that will show us the poem once again, piecing the many pieces into more than just many, where everyone is welcome, where everyone is heard, where everyone finds shelter in the shelter we make from the words that weave us together. I'd like to speak about what keeps abundance abundant, the Thirukkural and the nature of generosity. And I'll be drawing on my own translation of Thirukkural. There are some copies in the lobby if you care to purchase one. And I'm going to offer these reflections in 9 very short reflections. 1. On first glance, the Thirukkural can appear merely as a collection of sayings, a grab bag of maxims, a hodgepodge of various principles. But the Thirukkural offers a single, complex, and integrated vision, able to transform how we embody goodness in the world as radically in our own time as in any. One of the clearest ways to see this is to ask a question and to follow the Thirukkural's answer from verse to verse. Take, for instance, the matter of prosperity, abundance, plenty. What is the nature of such bounty? How does wise leadership and governance foster it? And what might the Thirukkural's answer suggest may be missing from our current conversations on the subject? This is the thread I propose to follow. And since Thiruvallur is a masterful weaver of words, we'll find that the thread touches everything in the whole, every corner of his bountiful fabric. 2. In part 2 of the Thirukkural, in the opening verse of the opening chapter on leadership, the Thirukkural proclaims 381, castle, kingdom, force, abundance, advisors, friends. The one with these 6 stands highest. Padai, Kudi, Kur, Amaichu, Natpu, Aran, Aram Udayan, Arsurul Gere. Here the word Thiruvallur employs for abundance or prosperity or material wealth is more commonly understood, at least in our own time, as referring to crops or food, particularly the thick and nourishing porridge made from millet, kur. One might be tempted to see this as no more than a quirk in how Tamar has developed over time. But a great poet like Thiruvallur means each and every word that he says in as many ways as he possibly can. The same is true of Shakespeare. It is thus worth asking, how do these meanings relate? 3. The first part of an answer leads us further into part 2, Thirukkural. In Kural 400, he defines prosperity in terms that could hardly be more emphatic. Learning is sacred, unperishing prosperity. All other wealth is not wealth. Then he examines the actions a leader takes and how they shape a people's well-being, and reminds us of a principle that our own time seems to have forgotten. Quote 463. Deeds that deplete possibility for gain, the wise do not even begin them. Akkam karadi muralirakkum sevanai uppar arivudiyar. It's here we begin to see why Thirukkural's Tamar wants to remind us how food, crops, and abundance all connect. The very possibility of every other kind of wealth begins and can only begin in the soil, in the ground beneath our feet. And any deed that depletes this first possibility, the fertility and fecundity of the earth, is thus fundamentally unwise. Yet even a cursory glance at any current newspaper reveals this is exactly what the so-called great nations of the world are all doing. Depleting the soil, destroying the forests, polluting the air, poisoning the oceans. No matter what apparent gain such actions might offer, their true cost is beyond reckoning. The Qural never allows us to forget that we depend first and always on the earth and the rain and the people who make our sustenance possible. Qural 1032. Farmers sustain everyone not farming. They are the pin holding the world together. This is among the truths that any leader must know in any time and place. We see it unequivocally in a verse from the chapter on good rule that some in our time might be tempted to dismiss as a kind of superstition, 545, where kings rule as wisdom decrees, rain and harvest abound. But it is the very opposite of superstition to acknowledge that the ways that we live and govern ourselves on earth have everything to do with the state of our climate and our capacity to grow food that can nourish our minds and bodies alike. 4. Thus, we cannot hope to think clearly about governance without also thinking clearly about rain. Our question thus takes us to part 1 of the Qural and to the second chapter, whose placement alone suggests that second only to the importance of God or the gods or the godlike qualities of human teachers are the life-giving glories of rain. For example, verse 11, because rain gives us the world, fitting to know it as ambrosia. In other words, ambrosia, the elixir of life, the nectar of the gods, isn't some fanciful substance from legend and mythology. It is instead the rain that makes life on earth possible. Within this encompassing ecological understanding, the ways we cultivate prosperity become all the more pressing. Qural 755 offers perhaps the strongest expression of a theme woven throughout the Qural as a whole, the right ways of making wealth. Shun absolutely the making of wealth that comes without mercy or love. Aralodum anbodum vara puralakam pullar puralavidar vidal. Surely mercy and love include honoring the earth that makes life possible and the farmers that make human life possible. Indeed, in the Qural's chapter on the mastery of action, Thirukkural makes clear what else pertains to abundance. 613. Generosity's glory abides in the excellent command of energy. This energy on the surface is the energy of effort, but all effort derives from the energy of the body. and the sun and the earth. And here, in this reminder, the Tamar goes, here in this reminder we find another clue in the word Thiruvallur has used for generosity. It means not only generosity and bounty, but also, and tellingly, the cultivation of soil. Generosity, that is, in English as in Tamar, is connected at its root to generation. Only the capacity to generate can lead to generosity. No wonder the abundance praise in the first Qur'an we looked at means crops and food, as well as wealth and abundance. All four are rooted in the same natural reality. And so 5, one of the great lessons the Qur'an can teach us is how to read down to the roots, the original meaning of the word radical in English. Not radical as some sort of political stance, but radical as literally belonging to the root. 6. This generosity of generation appears also in Qur'an 2:12, and generosity as pertaining to leadership appears in Qur'an 382. And whether in the world of the household or the world of the community, the failure to be generous, the failure to attain that name, that renown that comes from being generous, affects the generosity of the very earth itself. 239. Even the blameless abundance of earth dwindles beneath bodies without name. Vasayala vanpayan kundrum, isayala yakai puratta nilam. This is the state we live in now, the world's natural abundance diminishing at every turn. So 7, is there no hope? A person can hardly help asking the question. And to this as well, the Qur'an has an answer. In his chapter on farming, Thiruvallur states that if a farmer neglects the soil for too long, the land itself reacts. 1039. If its husbandman stays away, the land pulls back and sulks like a wife. Now the imagery may seem fanciful, but the act of sulking ushers in an unexpected hope, as we see in part 3 of the Qur'an on love. Its final 3 chapters explore how sulking, paradoxically, not only seasons and strengthens our relationships, but leads to a union and even bliss. In the first of these chapters, Thiruvallur describes what happens if a lover fails to turn back to the sulking beloved. 1304. Like severing the root of a withered vine, not turning to those turned away. Udiyavare uranarame vaadiya valli mudal arindatre. If the earth is sulking because of our mistreatment, the possibility of abundance, of a renewed abundance, lies in turning back to and tending the earth as gently as we tend to a beloved. 8. Such tending implies that every person, every community and its leaders cultivate a sense of autonomy and self-sufficiency. Qur'an 178. What keeps abundance abundant? Not craving what other hands hold. This is the self-sufficiency that looks to one's own hands for the true source of wealth. It is the self-sufficiency of the community that can both tend to its own and help those beyond its borders. The self-sufficiency of the farmer who can feed many households, including their own, and the self-sufficiency that is of the household able to be generous with others. And when all these self-sufficiencies are woven together with mercy and love, we have a form of political and ecological economy that makes it possible to welcome even strangers into our homes and our hearts without fear. Qur'an 83. The life that cherishes strangers each day never falls upon ruin. This is the unshakable abundance and generosity that the Qur'an cultivates and celebrates. And so, my final point, what about wealth being the wealth of learning and listening? Those seem very far from tending the earth, one might object. Yes, one might reply. but only if we've forgotten the connections that Thiruvallur and his Kural weave together in our hearts and minds. Abundance is the knowledge that honors abundance, understanding the nature of generosity, listening to the depths of our words and the world alike, and learning to keep abundance abundant. Then we can hope for the bliss of reunion that Thiruvallur describes in the last verse of his Kural as the joy of joys. Thank you. Nandri Varnakam.
வள்ளுவர் இப்போ இருந்தால் எப்படி இருக்கும் அப்படின்னு நான் நினச்சி பார்க்குறேன். ஜப்பானில் பிறந்து ஜப்பான் மொழியில் படித்து அமெரிக்காவுக்கு வந்து அமெரிக்காவில் வசித்து கனடாவுக்கு வந்து ஆங்கிலத்திலும் தமிழிலும் மிக அழகாக குரலை உச்சரித்து இவ்வளவு சிறப்பாக எங்களுக்கு உரையாற்றிய தோமஸ் ஹிட்டோசி புருக்சிமா அவர்களுக்கு மீண்டும் நன்றி. உங்களுடைய கரகோஷம். For the next session, I would like to invite Professor Daniel J. Raj. Irkara? One. So he is going to talk about diplomacy from Egyptian instruction of Eminenopi through the book of Proverbs in the Hebrew Bible.
அவையூரில் இருக்கக்கூடிய அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய வாழ்த்துக்கள். குறிப்பாக நம் முன்பாக அமர்ந்திருக்கக்கூடிய பேராசிரியர் ஜான் சாமுவேல் ஐயா, அந்த அம்மா அவர்களுக்கு என்னுடைய முதற்க நன்றியை நான் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். அதே போல் இங்கே கனடாவிலிருந்து இந்த மாநாட்டை சிறப்பாக தயார் செய்த சிவனிலங்கோ மற்றும் பேராசிரியர்கள் மற்றும் அனைவருக்கும் நன்றி. எங்களை அழைத்து எங்களுக்கு உபசரித்து விருந்தளித்து மகிழ்கின்ற உங்கள் ஒவ்வொருவருக்கும் எங்களுடைய நன்றியை நான் தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். இன்றைக்கு எனக்கு கொடுக்கப்பட்ட தலைப்பு என்னவென்றால், எகிப்து நாட்டின் இன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன் ஆஃப் அமன்ஹோட்டோப் என்றக்கூடிய ஒரு நூல் இருக்கிறது. அதற்கும் யூத கிறிஸ்தவ பைபிளில் இருக்கக்கூடிய நீதிமொழிகள் புத்தகத்திற்கும் திருக்குறளுக்கும் டிப்ளமசி தூது என்ற அழைப்பின் கீழ் என்ன ஒரு பொதுவான கருத்து இருக்கிறது என்பதுதான். நான் ஐயா கூட ஜான் சாமுவேல் ஐயா கூட பேசிக்கொண்டிருக்கும் போது எகிப்து நாட்டிற்கும் திருக்குறளுக்கும் தமிழ்நாட்டிற்கும் ஏதாவது தொடர்பு இருந்தால் நன்றாக இருக்கும், அதை பற்றி பேசினால் நன்றாக இருக்கும் என்று சொன்னார்கள். அந்த நேரத்தில் எனக்கு உடனே ஞாபகத்திற்கு வந்தது நீதிமொழிகள் புத்தகம்தான், த புக் ஆஃப் ப்ராவெர்ப்ஸ். அதில் உள்ள ஒரு பகுதி எகிப்திய நாட்டில் உள்ள இன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன் ஆஃப் அம்மனோப் என்னக்கூடிய அந்த பகுதிக்கு ஒத்திருக்கிறது. அதை திருக்குறளோடு ஒப்பிட்டு பார்த்தால் என்ன என்ற ஒரு சிந்தனையில் எழுந்ததுதான் இந்த கட்டுரை. Let me say, put it into English. I would like to approach this in three parts. First, the context of the three books. The Egyptian book that belongs to around 1200 years before the Common Era, and the book of Proverbs that's roughly around 1000 years before the Common Era, and Thirukkural, the age is still debated, but we know from 200 to 500 AD are common. These are three distinct writings from three different cultural backgrounds and three different people groups. So the context, what is it? And then secondly, I thought I would share with you a brief definition of diplomacy in three books. And finally, I would like to highlight 5 aspects of diplomacy that are in this book. I would not be able to do justice to everything, but I thought I would summarize and present the key. If you wish to read what I have written, please share with me your corresponding details. I'll be happy to share this essay with you. The book of Amanop, the instruction of Amanop, the author was a priest of a goddess. And somebody who esteemed this particular book hid it in a statue, in a wooden statue, and kept it away. And the British archaeologists found them and kept them for a long time. And in 1923, it was discovered. It is in hieroglyphics. And they released that book, the original facsimile with the translation. And a German man who found it very interesting and thought, wow, that there are a lot of similarities between the Egyptian writing and the biblical Hebrew writings in the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Proverbs, where it talks about moral behavior and how one should interact with their fellow human beings. And that book tells, be truthful, whoever sends you. When you come back, you have to be truthful to those who have sent you. Truthful on both sides, impartiality. And he tells, because remember, God is watching from above, and here below, you are responsible for the welfare of human beings who sent you. That is, so to say, roughly the summary of that book. And he writes it to the son, the priest's son, and who was to become a diplomat for the Pharaoh of Egypt, to different countries. When the Hebrew people were enslaved in that part for about nearly 400 years, they must have studied it in the schools, so that when they returned, they took that instruction and also placed it among the book of Proverbs, particularly chapter 22 to 27. There, in that context, parent, both father and mother, teach the children how to behave personally, domestically at home, and also in the society. And there it tells, be honest before God, and be honest be with one another. Enjoy life. It is for enjoyment. But remember, you are accountable for the freedom that you enjoy and for the choices that you make. That is Proverbs. And in Thirukkural, we know that diplomacy is scattered in different parts. And what might be the connection between the Egyptian book and this particular book of Proverbs with Thirukkural? It is not intertextuality, but conceptual relationships. That's what I can find. But who proposed it? I am not the first one to propose it. The first one is G.U. Pope, the English translator. He mentions names of two Egyptians who probably may have come to Tamil Nadu. Maybe, there is no historical proof, verifiable proof, or the Tamil people or Indians must have gone to Egypt and discussed with them. One of them is Pantaenus. Pantaenus was a Stoic philosopher of the 2nd century, a principal of a big catechetical school. He was a convert, but as a Stoic convert, he was debating with some Indian intellectuals, and supposedly he came to what we know today as Bombay, and in all probability he may have also visited Mylapore, where, according to one tradition, St. Thomas lived, served, and died martyr's death. Instrumental, so to say, in debating sages in Egypt at that time, in the 2nd century. And who are these people? Most probably they were Sanskrit-speaking philosophers, or Jains, or Buddhist monks with whom they were debating. Whether these people brought the Egyptian writing to India, we do not know, but there is possibility. This is a new area for research just opening up through this particular idea that I have gratefully received from Professor John Samuel, who is here with us. That's the background. What is diplomacy? In 3 books, we have similar definitions for that. In Amenhotep, in the Egyptian writing, diplomacy simply means there is a sender, the Pharaoh of Egypt sends you. And you are going to a people. When you are going to the people, you are making the bridge. And the bridge is a negotiated bridge. It is not coming all of a sudden. Because after all, the word diploma, it means folded document. The folded document is with a signature, and there is a sender, just like when academic community or anybody who is sending their graduates into the world to do the purpose for which they studied. That's why it is called diploma. And diplomacy is the same thing. There is a sender and there is a receiver, and they are a diplomat is the bridge, the one who bridges them. That's in the Egyptian writing is very clear. In the scriptures, particularly in the book of Proverbs, there is a saying, it tells, if you see a person who is skillful in his work, he will stand in front of kings, not in front of mean people. So the whole idea is be truthful, be sincere in what you do, and finally you will be able to stand in front of kings. Again, when you stand in front of kings, there are some etiquettes. That etiquettes you have to follow. There's a lot of things are said in this one. And when it comes to Thirukkural, we have many chapters about it. Amaichiyal, Arasiyal, but there is one particular chapter about Thudu, the diplomat, how they should behave, and beginning from their birth till their training and everything that is included. So that is, so to say, a definition of diplomacy in all three books. I said I would like to highlight 5 aspects of this particular book, all 3 books. What combines them, what might be called the commonality of these first and the 3 books. The first and foremost idea they give is listen carefully. Very careful listening. So the Egyptian book tells, when you listen, my son, to your father's instruction and do not forsake your mother's teaching. This is from the book of Proverbs. But when it comes to the book of the Egyptian book, it tells you need to listen involving the seat of your rationality and emotions. That is, they say, with heart. With heart you listen. So listening, it requires cultural sensitivity and great care so that they do not miss out the nuances of what they are hearing. So keen listening is important. And particularly in the Hebrew notion of hearing it's very similar to the Tamil word kel. In the Hebrew it is meant shama. Shama is not merely hearing and going away. It is hearing in order to grow, in order to obey, in order to enrich human life. That is one of the reasons where most of the Hebrew prayers begin with the word, hear, O Israel. Listen, O Israel. So that's the key. Very similar to what we know in Tamil kel. So kelvi, in the Porutpal it comes, so hear with your ears. Keen listening, that's first part. Second one is when you are reporting, be impartial. Don't fear or do not show favor. What you see, you report with very careful in speech and also in writing. And they say, when you write, when you communicate things, remember to benefit most number of people in your country. Not only in the country where you are sent as a diplomat. That is the Egyptian writing. You are representing the country, the Egypt, in another country, but remember, when you are reporting back, it should help the Egyptians, the most number of Egyptians. When you are there, you promote the concerns of Egypt, but it should be impartial. In the book of Proverbs, it also tells, when you report, let your reporting be healing. It should not cause any hurt. If there are hurtful things are there, then what do? Keep it in your belly. That's what it tells. Don't reveal it too much. So do not dwell too much on the negative things, but stress so much about good things. But remember, when you are reporting it, you are putting things in a balance. But use the right weight and right measurements And what is right and what is true, it is not merely customary in the Hebrew writing. It tells God is the one who sets that standards, but you as a human being use your rationality to evaluate how far you can use it. That's it. The third part is a deference to authority. The Pharaoh sends, but Pharaoh remains the highest. So the kings are the rulers who receive you. They receive you, but remember, you are a diplomat only. You are a representative, but you can never become a king. You can never become a ruler in the other country. Your job is communicating the concerns of your country, and you do that. But when you are in the chambers of rulers, be humble, be moderate. Do not push yourself too much. In the book of Proverbs, it tells when you are eating with kings and others, put a knife at your throat. It tells, do not be glutton. Because by eating, they will judge who you are. So do not be deceived by the food that is offering to you in a political context. Do not lose your mind. So keep who you are. And here again, the Hebrew concept is God is in control, but you as a representative of your king, ultimately you are accountable to God, but do not deceive anybody. Do knowingly or unknowingly try to be moderate. And then in Thirukkural, when it comes, imitate the life of Sandror and Period. Here again, I am very much indebted to Professor Samuel for telling me time and again about the qualities of Sandror, about Anbu, Nan, Oppuravu, Kannotam, Vaimai. All these 5 things the diplomats have to follow too. So that is the fourth point. The third one, the deference to authority. The fourth one is avoiding mean companions. When you are somewhere else, when you are on a big duty, be careful not to associate with somebody who is going to pull you down. In the Egyptian book, it tells, do not associate yourself with babblers, sluggards, deceivers, procrastinators, and those who are angry. Don't associate with them with themselves, because they will mislead you. In the book of Proverbs, the same words occur. Envoys should avoid babblers, because the babblers reveal the secrets. You cannot confine any secret to them. They will reveal it. And they will reveal it to your enemies particularly. And then your whole purpose will be spoiled. And in Thirukkural, it tells many things. So, Sitrinam Seramai, Therindu Seyalvagai, Thiya Natpu, Kuda Natpu. So, I see a lot of similarities between this one, avoiding mean people in diplomatic enterprise. But what I find most astonishing in 3 books is the importance given to the empowerment of the poor and needy. Most of the time it is about the kings and rulers, wealthy people, but all 3 books concentrate on alleviating the suffering for the poor. So in the Egyptian book, it tells, do not mistreat the destitute, do not plunder the poor, do not abandon them to the crocodile-infested Nile. It seems they used to throw the people into that river. But this book prohibits that, the Egyptian book. And they also say land management. When it comes to do not change the boundaries of the ancestors. Wherever the ancestral land is there, let the marks, boundaries, respect them. In other words, do not invade other countries unnecessarily. In the book of Proverbs 2, poverty is a preventable one, and again by distributing the wealth in an even manner, which is not very easy, but it is possible. Envoys should not rob the poor because they are poor, or crush the afflicted at the gates of, because they say God, that means the God of the covenant. That's how it is called Yahweh. It is not any God. So God of the covenant who has covenanted with humanity for their betterment, and that God will plead. And so do not rob anybody. Do not move the ancient landmark of your fathers. Very similar to what the Egyptian book tells. And in Thirukkural, it tells all sufferings, including poverty, hunger, sickness, and other conflicts are preventable. For that, you need good relationships. Nal kuravu. So the lack of poverty, lack of good thing is the poverty, but it is a wretchedness that causes it. And in Thirukkural, there are ways to overcome them. Finally, what can we learn? How do we summarize these 3 books? I thought it is the broad, interdisciplinary, conceptual comparison between the ancient Egyptian writing and the Hebrew book of the Proverbs and the Thirukkural in Thirukkural. Despite cultural differences, geographical distances, we see these 5 common elements of being a diplomat: keen listening, impartial reporting, deference to authorities, and avoidance of harmful associations, and advocacy for the betterment of the poor in the society. So it seems, though from different areas, they have a concern of making the human life a noble life. In comparing all the 3 books, in my opinion, Thirukkural excels. No other writing thus far has given that amount of importance for diplomatic understanding as does the book of Thirukkural. So I hope there are many ways of comparative study like this, and I wish and pray that here in this conference and in the future conferences, we may be able to see more similarities between Thirukkural and literature of the world. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Daniel, who delivered wonderful comparison between the Quran and Hebrew Bible in terms of Egyptian political governance and diplomacy. I request all the speakers to maintain the time, please, between the 15 to 20 minutes. Next, I call upon Dr. Brenda Beck. Okay, see you soon.
Good afternoon.
Excuse me, I have to check.
I'm going to talk about the lotus. So that's just something that you can gaze at while I speak. You may wonder why the lotus and what the lotus has to do with the Thirukkural. Well, let me start by saying, as many of the excellent speakers have mentioned just before me, that the Thirukkural, and in fact the real essence of Tamil culture, is an oral culture. And until recently, as you all well know, there was a lot of emphasis on memorizing traditional sayings, traditional poems, and knowledge was very closely linked to memorization. We're losing that now, and children are no longer being asked to memorize, especially in our local environment here in Canada. And so, in order to teach the very important ideas and themes in the Thirukkural, we need, I think, some other ways of teaching. And one of the ways that I find very effective, especially with younger people who are now so used to watching television, something I never had as a child, the visual world and the visuals presented on television are very powerful. And so I want to suggest in this talk that the lotus is a very powerful image that can be used to teach the Thirukkural. And I want to show you how that is true. And you might ask me, where did you get this peculiar idea? And I would say, first of all, I got it from Popli, because of the 5 different translations I have of the Thirukkural, Popli is the one who uses the image of a lotus. And that is the image that's at the front of his book. He doesn't really talk about that image, but it is very suitable to the content of the Thirukkural, and I'm going to show you how. That is, if I can make this work. Can somebody help me? Which button do I push?
You want to point it towards,
Oh, I point it over here. I see. There. No? I'm sorry. This is... Okay, there, we'll leave it there. So I've just enhanced the image of the lotus with a little bit of color to make it easier to understand. And in addition to finding the lotus on the cover of Popli's translation, I've spent 60 years working with a wonderful folk epic, which you may not know about. It's an oral epic from the Kongu Nadu area of Tamil Nadu. A huge epic. It takes 36 hours for the bards to sing. The bards were illiterate, and they sang the story from memory. And the key heroine, who's the center of this wonderful epic story, her name is Tamarai, which of course means lotus. And she is really the emblem, the symbol of the whole story. And of course you can associate a beautiful woman with a lotus with a lovely blossom. But she sits on a pillar for many, many years, begging Shiva to help her procreate and to have children so that she can continue her kingdom. That is her mission in life. And by sitting on that pillar, she's also like a lotus, because a lotus, of course, sits on a very tall stem that starts in the mud underneath a pond or a river and grows up through the water until it finally finds the sun, and then it blossoms and opens. Also, the lotus is very sensitive to the sun and to the rain. As I try to illustrate in that lower picture, it absorbs the energy of all the gifts from the sky, which are both sun and rain and light in general. Now let's see if I can get the next one. No, other way. Yes.
We can operate from here. You can operate from here.
Okay.
It's a slide you want, right?
Okay. So I forgot to mention that in the corner of the previous slide, there were some lotus leaves with dew on them. And dew is another gift from the sky. And the lotus leaves have this kind of wax on them that holds the morning dew, which is like jewels coming from the sky in the early morning, which are the words of wisdom, the kind of insights, if you like, that we acquire by studying and learning what the sky can teach us. But in addition to the lotus flower, which is here, the lotus stands on a stem, and it has these beautiful round leaves. And the round leaves also are symbolic, I think, of ideas in the Thirukkural, particularly in the Puratpal, because there are 2 leaves. and they're like a balance. And what the Thirukkural tells us is that where there are differences of opinion and where there is a struggle and competition, it is the importance of the ruler to be able to balance and work out ways to make those two sides work together. And I think that's a theme that I see in many aspects of Tamil culture, including this wonderful epic that I've studied, which has two heroes who are twin brothers. And they're very different in personality. One is powerful and aggressive and gets things done. The other one is thoughtful and contemplative, and he thinks about the basic ethics and issues in life. And one has to balance those out. You can't just take them to fight and see which one wins. So that is one of the images of the leaves on the lotus. And I've shown you some pictures of the kavadi. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the kavadi. The kavadi, to me, emphasizes the same idea. There are two pots of water carried to the temple by a kavadi dancer, one on each side of the arch. And the kavadi dancer himself, as he moves and jumps around, he has to balance those two pots of water in order to successfully bring them and offer them to the god or the goddess. Next. Well, what about enemies? How does the Thirukkural and the lotus bring together the idea of the enemy? Well, you may not know that the wasp is the enemy of the bee. And of course, the bee represents the workers, the people who till the fields, who bring the produce of the farms to harvest. They're extremely important for the success of any kingdom. And at the very center of the lotus, if you looked at it carefully, there's a beautiful light yellow center that's like a little table. And it's like an offering or like a tray that you would set in front of the gods with the harvest, with the fruits, with the most beautiful things you can think of to offer the god. And it is right there, symbolized beautifully on the center of the lotus. Well, the problem is the wasps. As the bees, of course, the lotus attracts the workers by this wonderful smell. And as soon as it releases the smell, the bees start to come to harvest the honey in the lotus, at which it's harvested by the pollen that the bees pick up. But then the wasps come. So how does the lotus protect and help its workers? Its scent also attracts the frogs, and the frogs will eat the wasps. So the frogs are like the protectors, the militia, the army that stands around and make sure to protect the bees so that they can harvest what is so important from the lotus flower. And the lotus really is the whole kingdom. You have the beautiful blossom, you have the harvest, and you have the busy bees, the workers, collecting the harvest and then making it into a substance that really can be marketed and shared by everyone. That's the honey. Well, it's also interesting in this epic story called the Anandmar story, the story of the brothers, which I've studied for so many years, there are also wasps. And I find it interesting that in the story, the wasps are not enemies, the wasps are friends. Why are they friends? Because the king has managed to work with the wasps and offer them an important role, and the wasps become the protectors. So when the king and queen leave the palace to go out for various reasons, they ask the wasps to protect the palace. So that's another example of how a really brilliant king can get what could be potentially enemies to work with him. Okay. And there's one other thing. You can start the next slide. One other interesting thing you may not know about the lotus. I've done a lot of reading about it because to me it's a very inspirational flower. At night, you probably know, as the sun sets, the lotus closes. And in the morning, as the sun rises, the lotus flower opens. But what's interesting is that there are bees that spend the night in the lotus. And the lotus, according to the botanists, actually produces heat and keeps the bees warm. So again, the symbolism that visitors and people who come to help the king will not only protect them, but also give them comfort, give them warmth, and let them sleep comfortably and safely as if inside a lotus flower. Now we come to the stem of the lotus, which is very tall and straight. And that, to me, symbolizes the part in the Thirukkural that talks about how you need to be strong, you need to be brave, but you also need to maintain your values and your sense of direction and purpose and protect. And no matter what kind of challenges confront you, you need to protect yourself. And you may not know that the lotus has quite sharp thorns on the stem. So much so that several people have warned me, never swim in a lotus pond because you can get caught by the thorns of the lotus stems. So the stem is very symbolic of being able to progress and rise up through the water, through those challenges, and maintain your purpose and your focus to reach the sun. And then, these are the basic metaphors that I'm talking about. We have a country, we have a fortress, we have the wealth. The wealth is the pollen, which is the farmer's wealth being produced in the center of the lotus. We have the army, we have the friends, and we have the laborers, and we have the enemies. They're all represented in ways that you can talk about what the chorale has to say. And I think that helps a lot. It certainly helps me remember what the chorale says, to think of it in terms of the visualizing a lotus. Anyway, this is just I sort of grabbed these at the last moment when I realized I only had 20 minutes. But I've talked about the king, the importance of the king and the importance of wealth. And I've many more citations in my longer paper. If you want to ask me, I'll be delighted to send you a copy. Chorale passages that give you the essence of these various ideas. And more of the same, the state, the ministers, and verses from the chorale that emphasize the themes that the lotus can express. And this I really like. This is one of the things that attracts me most about the lotus. And you can go way, way back to at least 150 BC and probably earlier in the Buddhist carvings around Buddhist stupas. It's very common to see a pot with not only some lotus blossoms, but also the lotus as it comes to the end of its life and it droops down. And what it's doing is it's gifting its seed to the waters below, because a lotus grows up from the water, from the pond. And when it's ripened and it has completed its efforts on earth, it turns over and it gives its seed back to the ponds to start the next generation, as we were talking about in some of the earlier presentations. I think it's a very beautiful image. And if you look at the Egyptian imagery of kings and lotuses, you'll see that the lotus held in the hand of the king actually droops down. It's not straight up. And I think the idea that's being emphasized is the one of giving. You must give, you must share everything you have, you must work for the benefit of the whole society and not for yourself. And so the lotus is a very, very powerful giving image. And just a few days ago, I got a sort of circular from the Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore with the image on the left. And I thought it was very nice because it contrasts 150 BC with last week. And what the artist has done is taken a lovely image of a woman holding a lotus flower and suggested, by what he drew with white lines on the edges of the picture, the lotus as the king or the kingdom grows and gives and blossoms, and then it must turn over and give back and allow the next generation of kings and leaders to take over. And that last part, knowing that you are passing on whatever you've been able to produce and create to the next generation, is a very, very important aspect of the lotus imagery. Next. Okay, this is my final slide, and I wanted to add the rhizome, which is right at the bottom, and that is the kind of the root of the lotus. And everything, of course, comes up from the root. And one of the interesting things, it's subtle, but it's very clear, and Thomas mentioned it in his talk, is that the root is really where everything comes from. And it is especially women that are associated with being a part of the root and being able to generate the next generation and to be the foundation. Nothing really can be supported and go out and do the work in the world without a solid foundation. That is the root, the rhizome, which is sort of like the potato or the, the sort of, what we say, the vault hidden in the mud at the bottom from which the lotus struggles to grow up. And it takes its resources, its energy, and its beauty from the rhizome. So that's my imagery, and I think, especially if you're teaching younger people about the values of the Thirukkural, using the image of the lotus helps people to remember and to understand how all these ideas about how a good kingdom should prosper and contribute to the wealth and abundance and happiness and joy of its citizens is to think of how a lotus does that through its support from the rhizome and its giving back its seeds to the earth in the mud. Thank you very much.
You can stand over here. Nandri, thank you so much, Dr. Brenda, for your beautiful presentation about metaphor, beautiful lotus flower as an example to explain the governance in Kural. Thank you so much. எங்கே உங்கள் கரகோஷம் வேண்டும். அடுத்தது எங்களுடைய சிறப்பு பேச்சாளரை அழைக்கவிருக்கிறேன். கொஞ்சம் டைமை பார்த்துக்குங்க. டாக்டர் டெனிஷன் ஜெயசூர்யா ஃப்ரம் மலேசியா.
Can I take the mic out?
That's the idea.
எல்லாருக்கும் திரும்பி வணக்கத்தை தெரிவிக்கிறேன். I'm not sure how you are feeling. I'm already feeling extremely tired. So what I thought, it will be helpful to see a set of slides as how our other doctor also presented. I've taken Thiruvallur's teachings on justice and its relevance to good governance and development today. And I have 3 parts. I will try my best to do it slowly. I'll come this side. And we'll have a look at it. I'll look at specifically 5 kurals. And I would link justice to right action, which the Thirukkural, Thiruvallur makes, and also justice to fairness and impartiality that the text provides. Then I thought of doing something different from what most speakers have done, And I tried to link it to another more contemporary and radical thinker, Periyar, on his ideas of justice and its relevance to the Thirukkural, and applied to right action to Dravidian model on women empowerment and addressing class and caste issues in Tamil Nadu. And then look at some material on the Dravidian model and look at one or two movies that I would highlight. This is because my link to Tamil culture and Tamil Nadu is actually Tamil movies. And my wife catches me watching a Tamil movie every night, and I'm saying I'm busy doing my work, but my headphones are on some Tamil movie, and I do. My background is as a sociologist, and so some of the references would and implications would be similar but also different, and I try to make it more contemporary to today's issues. Now, I think this is the wrong set of slides. Sorry, can I get the right set of slides, please? This is the older one. Okay, we got it. Can you enlarge it? Yeah. Oh my. Yes. So I thought it's important to acknowledge I don't read Tamil or write Tamil, and I'm totally dependent on his translation. And I wanted to say it is my children and grandchildren also cannot read. So Thomas writing an appreciation of the Thirukkural and a more contemporary application has relevance not only to Tamils but across the world as well. Now I took the 5 Kurals on justice. That means I followed the word justice as Thomas translated them from the text. And that the Kural highlights the king protects and carries out justice. So the kingly task or a leader's task, and justice a light to all kings. Doing what is right is the way of justice. That's important. And people look to the king for justice. And justice also protects the king because it's doing right, and as a result, his kingdom is safeguarded. The 5. Now, when we link it to right action, there are so many things that could be said. But the Kural brings this out in 31. Doing right is more valuable than eternity, wealth, or life. So people measure their sum total of success by either wealth or material accumulation. But here the theme is one of doing what is right. And action is purity of heart and mind. So it is linked to the conscience because there is no defining what is right and wrong. Human beings by their conscience would know it and apply it. And right action is freedom from envy, desire, anger, bitter words that come out from the Kural. And so right action. So in doing justice or righteousness, the right thing, these are some points. And it's also in the idea of fairness and impartiality. Not just in the courts, it's also parents handling their children or their siblings and all. Fairness and goodness and fairness to all, irrespective of gender, age, ethnicity, and so forth. So renouncing wealth gain, in terms of fairness, and fairness means speech without bias. So much of the world is caught in bias and partiality, but like Amartya Sen and others, which could be analyzed in. Now, what are some lessons from the Kural that I could apply to governance and leadership? Because we are not in a monarchy, we are post-monarchy in parliamentary and constitutional democracy. We can apply reference to justice and kings to modern-day national leaders, elected, local or provincial and national. Second, justice defines modern day's leadership in politics and governance. So justice must be central to that, not just law, but beyond law in this case. People expect justice from the courts, judges and those in leadership, that they would be impartial, it will be fair, it could be achieved for even the poorest person fighting the state or the police or even big-time politicians, that the courts, the judges, the leadership would be fair and just. So political and community leaders must do what is right for political gain or remaining in politics, but to be above that, to be truthful to justice, because there's a God who will evaluate us. And finally, justice and right conduct will protect national and community leaders in public life. So 5 points I drew from the Kural and right action as well as impartiality. And I then try to look at it to Periyar's thoughts. So I look at Periyar and through my Google search and materials, he is saying that the Thirukkural is not just an ancient literature, it's a contemporary guide for living and moral rational life, as a key text for promoting the vision of a progressive and just society. And then there is reference to Periyar's view of justice, which overlaps with Thiruvallur's in the principle of impartiality, fairness, ethical governance. So this is coming quite strong. And in Periyar and his influence through the Dravidian as well as Tamil Nadu politics, the commitment to Tamil in both the key leaders, Thiruvallur and Periyar, and key to the leadership and governance and development is empowerment of women and girl children through education and so forth, and women's position in society, and the struggle against the caste system and issues related. Periyar and his views on religion, his anti-Hindu position, especially against Brahmanism, and that's been controversial in the political discussions today. So there are similarities, but there are also differences. And I think all of us will agree that one major difference is in reference to God. Thiruvallur recognized the place of the divine in his saying. Periyar was more an atheist and a Marxist reformer. This does not mean all of Periyar's work and thoughts are not relevant. Periyar had a high view of Thirukkural in that sense. And one area that stood out in my Google search and reading is this idea of the Thiruvallur on agriculture, farming, the dedicated farmer, water as we heard, and farming is devoted to farmers and farming. And there is a lot of relevance to food security, food safety and things like that, which is now being discussed at the global level. But Periyar's was much more on land ownership, which the Thiruvallur doesn't really address, unless those of you who know the Tamil better can enlighten me. He saw landless peasants under the weight of the feudal and caste-based structures which enslaved them, and he attacked the deep inequalities in society. So there are similarities, there are differences, and one is more contemporary and an impact. And then I raised this question, is Thiruvallur's ideas and Periyar's ideas impacting Tamil Nadu in its socio-economic development framework. And so I get this idea that Thirukkural's universal ethical principles become the moral foundations of the state. To what extent and so forth can be tested. And Periyar's self-respect justice movement, anti-caste, women empowerment, emphasis on education and so forth has had tremendous impact. And that Tamil Nadu created effective institutions, food, health, education, poverty. They called the freebies of Tamil Nadu, whether it was Jayalalitha's time or other politicians. But there are other studies to show many of these had impact long-term for development. And the strategies emphasizes status, addressing inequalities of caste and gender, rather than just income inequalities in the society. Now, one of the key books, academic books that came out is this one, the Dravidian model. It wasn't launched in Tamil Nadu. It was actually, I watched this on YouTube. It was in Harvard and other places that these works were discussed. Explains the socio-economic development of Tamil Nadu state in terms of the mobilization against caste-based inequalities. And that was then being quantified by education, income, employment, social mobility, and also comparing Tamil Nadu with other state developments in India. And the development model is accessed through social reform, especially on education and women empowerment. That if you got women well educated and into the forefronts, the Suya Valarchi Kulu and the economic empowerment of women in Tamil Nadu made a major difference and impact. So high levels of investment in human development. So Coimbatore could produce the CEO of Google. Who would ever imagine that Pichai, with the name Pichai, you would now be one of the richest, most talented IT sort of person in the US. But it's true, institutions of the state that provided that in Tamil Nadu, state policy and programs for the low caste and reservation, mobilization, and so forth. Okay, this one is the interesting part because it impacted development agenda. Did it impact movies? So all the time people say movies are bad, terrible, all the fighting and killing and the gundas and so forth. And just a few minutes. So we see the movies bringing the issues of caste and fight on the ugly side, police brutality against corruption, access. And some of the movies that brought this out are the ones in 2018, Asojan, Karunan, and Jayabim. And Mari Selvaraj is one of the writers who then has the impact. They are not using the word Thirukkural or Periyar, but their themes of social change and reform is bringing it out in the movies that he highlighted on gender, caste, art, mobility. This movie, of course, brings it out very strongly, Jayabim and the habeas corpus case of the Madras High Court, which was very instrumental in addressing the issues of the disadvantaged and the lady. And the man responsible was this lawyer then, who took only 1 rupee to fight the case and eventually became the High Court judge, Chandu. It's well documented on the confidence on the judicial system. Oops, just one more. There's a reference to Ambedkar and my concluding thoughts. So Thirukkural's understanding of justice is quite critical in relationships and living. It's not just to impact ethical and moral living at one level, but it must impact, as Periyar brings out, socio-economic well-being. And I believe it's a moral compass for human conduct, not just at the personal, family, but community and national level. Doing the right thing as an internalized value will build the nation. Thank you very much. Sorry, I took...
Nandri. Thank you, Dr. Dennis and Jayasuriya, for your presentation, particularly this topic, the justice and Thirukkural. 2000 வருஷத்துக்கு பிறகும் இன்னும் தெரிந்தலை அப்படின்னா ஒன்றும் செய்யல. அவ்வளவு தூரம் இன்னும் அந்த அவர் சொன்ன விஷயங்கள் தொடர்ச்சியாக நடந்து கொண்டு இருக்கிறது. அதுக்கான தீர்வுகள் இல்லாமல் இருக்கிற ஒரு சூழ்நிலையில் அனைவருக்கும் நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொண்டு அடுத்து ஒரு நூல் வெளியீடு நிகழ்வு நடைபெறவிருக்கிறது. வாங்க. வைக்கவா வச்சுவா.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். நூல் வெளியீடு ஒன்றினை அறிமுகம் செய்ய அழைத்திருக்கிறார்கள். அமெரிக்காவிலே முதலாக மருத்துவ பீடத்தில் திருமூலர் தமிழ் இருக்கை வாய்ப்பை ஏற்படுத்திய சுந்தர் பாலசுப்ரமணியம் உயிரியல் வேதியியல் துறையிலே பேராசிரியராக பணியாற்றுகின்ற இப்பெருமகனார் திருக்குறளை அடிப்படையாக கொண்டு மூச்சு பயிற்சி பற்றிய ஒரு சிறப்பு நூலை இப்பொழுது இங்கே வெளியிட இருக்கின்றார்கள். திருமூலர் தமிழ் இருக்கை என்று சொல்லப்படுகின்ற ஒரு வாய்ப்பை அமெரிக்க பல்கலைக்கழகத்திலே வாய்ப்பு ஏற்படுத்தி இன்று அமெரிக்க பல்கலைக்கழகத்தினுடைய மருத்துவ பீடத்திலே சவுத் கரோலினா பல்கலைக்கழக மருத்துவ பீடத்திலே அறிமுகம் செய்திருக்கின்ற பெருமைக்குரிய சுந்தர் பாலசுப்ரமணியம் அவர்கள் இப்பொழுது மேடையிலே வந்து திருக்குறள் தொடர்பாக மூச்சு பயிற்சி, திருக்குறளிலே மருத்துவவியல் துறை சார்ந்த பகுதிகளை அடிப்படையாக கொண்டு தான் ஆராய்ச்சி செய்த அந்த அறிக்கையை நூலாக இங்கே அரங்கேற்றுகின்றார்கள். இப்பெருமகனார்தான் இன்று உலக அரங்கிலே திருமூலருடைய 3000 திருமந்திரத்தை அடிப்படையாக கொண்டு பல்கலைக்கழக மருத்துவ பீடத்திலே திருமூலர் தமிழ் இருக்கை என்கின்ற சித்தர் மருத்துவ துறையை அமெரிக்க பல்கலைக்கழகத்திலே அறிமுகம் செய்து அதற்கான வாய்ப்பை ஏற்படுத்தி உலக அரங்கிலே இன்றைக்கு பேசப்படுகின்ற ஒரு அறிஞராகிய சுந்தர் பாலசுப்ரமணியம் அவர்களுடைய இந்த நூல், அவர் பற்றிய சிறப்பை அறிமுகம் செய்வதிலே நான் இப்பொழுது மகிழ்ச்சி அடைகிறேன். இப்பொழுது அவர்கள் இந்த நூலை வெளியிட்டு வைப்பார்கள்.
ஒரு நிமிஷம்.
ஐயா ஆறு திருமுருகன் வெளியிட பிரீத் எ லிட்டில் பெட்டர் ஒன் பிரணயம் எ வீக் என்ற சுந்தர் பாலசுப்ரமணியம் எழுதிய இந்த நூலினை ஐயா ஆறு திருமுருகன் வெளியிட திரு சிவம் வேலுப்பிள்ளை அவர்களும் நாதன் வீரசிங்கம் அவர்களும் முதல் படிகளை பெற்றுக்கொள்ள இருக்கிறார்கள். அவர்களை மேடைக்கு அழைக்கிறோம். வெளியிட்ட அறிஞர் ஐயா அவர்களுக்கும், பெற்றுக்கொண்ட உறுப்பினர்களுக்கும் மற்றும் நூலாசிரியர் சுந்தர் பாலசுப்ரமணியம் அவர்களுக்கும் நன்றி. இந்த நூல் வெளியீட்டினுடைய ஏற்புரையாக முனைவர் சுந்தர் பாலசுப்ரமணியம் அவர்களை 5 to 10 மணித்துளிகளுக்குள் பேசுமாறு இந்த மேடைக்கு அழைக்கிறோம். இந்த பேச்சுக்கு பிறகு ஏற்கனவே நம்மளுடைய இணை அமர்வுகள் 3 அரங்கங்களில் தொடங்க காத்திருக்கின்றன. விரைந்து இந்த அமர்வை முடித்துக்கொண்டு நாம் இணை அமர்வுகளில் சந்திப்போம். நன்றி.
அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். நேரம் கருதி என்னுடைய உரையை மிக மிக சுருக்கமாக நான் சொல்ல விரும்புவதை சொல்கிறேன். இந்த நிகழ்ச்சியின் ஏற்பாட்டாளர்கள் அனைவருக்கும், இங்கே வந்திருக்கக்கூடிய ஆன்றோர்கள் சான்றோர்கள் அனைவருக்கும் என்னுடைய பணிவான வணக்கம். நிறைமொழி மாந்தர் பெருமை நிலத்து மறைமொழி காட்டிவிடும் என்பது திருவள்ளுவம். இந்த நம்முடைய நிறைமொழி மாந்தர்கள் நிறைந்திருக்கக்கூடிய இந்த மண்ணினுடைய மிக முக்கியமான ஒரு செய்தியாக நம்முடைய திருக்குறள் இருக்கிறது. காலையில் அறிஞர்கள் இங்கே பேசி கொண்டிருக்கிறார்கள். திருக்குறளை இந்த காதில் கேட்போம், மனசில் தங்கவும், சில நேரம் தங்காமல் இந்த காதில் வெளியில் போயிடும். அதை எவ்வாறு உடலில் தங்க வைக்கிறது, எவ்வாறு வாழ்க்கைக்கு நாம் திருக்குறளை பயன்படுத்துவது என்பது குறித்து தான் நான் என்னுடைய ஆராய்ச்சிகளை மேற்கொண்டு வருகிறேன். முக்கியமாக திருமந்திரத்திலிருந்து மூச்சு பயிற்சி முறைகளை தொகுத்து அறிவியல் பூர்வமான செய்திகளை ஆராய்ந்து வருகிறது எங்களுடைய மருத்துவக் கல்லூரி. தென் கரோலினா மருத்துவ பல்கலைக்கழகத்திலே திருமூலர் தமிழ் இருக்கை என்ற ஒரு அமைப்பினை ஏற்படுத்துவதற்காக பணியாற்றி கொண்டிருக்கிறோம். அந்த வகையில் நாம் மூச்சு பயிற்சியினை செய்யும் போது உடலில் ஏற்படக்கூடிய மாற்றங்கள் என்னென்ன, அந்த உமிழ்நீரில் ஏற்படக்கூடிய வேதி மாற்றங்கள் என்னென்ன என்பதை பற்றியெல்லாம் எங்களுடைய குழு ஆராய்ந்து கொண்டிருக்கிறது. அதை போலவே இந்த பயிற்சிகளை செய்வதன் மூலம் புற்றுநோய் அல்லது மறதி போன்ற நோய்களை எவ்வாறு நாம் குணப்படுத்தி கொள்வது அல்லது வராமல் தடுத்து கொள்வது என்பதை பற்றியும் ஆராய்ச்சிகள் மேற்கொண்டு வருகிறோம். இந்த ஆராய்ச்சிகளை மேம்படுத்துவது தான் திருமூலர் தமிழுடைய நோக்கம். அந்த வகையில் இந்த நூல் பிரீத் அ லிட்டில் பெட்டர் 1 பிராணாயாமா அ வீக் என்ற நூலை பற்றி யோசிக்கும் போது திருக்குறளை கேட்பவர்கள் அதனை உடலிலே தங்குவதற்கு, முக்கியமாக அதை மெய்யிலே சேர்த்து கொள்வதற்கான முறையாக மூச்சு பயிற்சியினை வடிவமைத்தேன். அதாவது ஒரு அதிகாரத்தை எடுத்துக்கொண்டோம் என்றால் அதில் இருக்கக்கூடிய 10 குறட்பாக்களுக்கும் 10 மூச்சு பயிற்சிகளை வடிவமைத்தேன். உதாரணமாக சொல்ல வேண்டும் என்றால் மருந்து அதிகாரம். மருந்து அதிகாரத்திலே உங்களுக்கே தெரியும், திருக்குறளில் மருந்து அதிகாரத்தில் 6 குறட்பாக்கள் எதை பற்றி இருக்கு? உணவை பற்றி இருக்கு. எவ்வாறு உணவு உண்ண வேண்டும் அப்படிங்கிறத பற்றி தான் இருக்கு. மீதி 4 குறட்பாக்கள் மருத்துவத்தை பற்றி இருக்கு. மிகினும் குறையினும் நோய் செய்யும் நூலோர் வழி முதலா எண்ணிய 3 என்று முதல் குறள் ஆரம்பிக்கிறது. அதுல வழியை முதன்மையாக கொண்டு அப்படின்னா என்னது? நம்ம வழி அழல் அயம் என்பது சித்த மருத்துவம். அந்த 3 நம்ம சொல்றோம் இல்லையா, வாதம் பித்தம் கபம் என்று சொல்கிறோம் அல்லவா. அந்த வாத பித்த கப நாடிகளை நாம் சரியாக வைத்து கொண்டோம் என்றால் நமக்கு எந்த விதமான நோயும் அணுகாது என்பது நோய் அணுகா விதியிலே சித்த மருத்துவத்தில் சொல்லப்படக்கூடிய குறிப்பு. அதைத்தான் திருவள்ளுவரும் சொல்லியிருக்காரு. இது மாதிரி மிகினும் குறையினும் நோய் செய்யும் நூலோர். அதையும் வழி முதலா என்று சொன்னார்னா வழியைத்தான் முதன்மையாக நாம் கட்டுப்படுத்த முடியும். அதனால தான் திருமூலரும் சொல்லியிருப்பாரு, ஐவர்க்கு நாயகன் அவ்வூர் தலைமகன் உய்ய கொண்டு ஏறும் குதிரை மற்றொன்று உண்டு. அந்த குதிரை தான் வாயு. அந்த வாயு என்ற குதிரையை கட்டி கொண்டோம் என்றால் நாம் மற்ற 3 குணங்களையும் நாம் திருத்தி அமைத்து கொள்ள முடியும் என்பதுதான் நம்முடைய ஆன்றோர்களுடைய வழிமுறை, நிறைமொழி மாந்தர்களுடைய வழிமுறை. அந்த வழிமுறையை பயன்படுத்தி அப்போ 3 குணத்தையும் நம்ம சரி செய்யணும்னா என்ன பயிற்சி செய்யணும் அப்படிங்கிறது பிராணாயாமத்தில் நம்முடைய யோகிகள் சித்தர்கள் சொல்லியிருக்காங்க. அந்த முக்குண வாயுவை முறுக்கி மூலத்தே என்று திருமூலர் சொல்லுவார். அந்த முக்குணமும் பொருந்தி இருக்கக்கூடியது அந்த வாயு தான். அந்த வாயுவை சரி பண்ணிட்டோம்னா அந்த வாத பித்த கபம் நீங்கிறோம். அப்போ காலையில் நம்ம பயிற்சி செஞ்சோம்னா நம்முடைய பித்தம் அரும், மதியத்திலே பயிற்சி செய்தால் வாதம் அரும், மாலையிலே பயிற்சி செய்தால் கபம் அரும் என்பதையும் திருமூலர் அழகாக சொல்லியிருக்கிறார். அதுக்கு இந்த குறளை படிக்கிறோம், அதுக்கான மூச்சு பயிற்சியை செய்கிறோம். இதே தொடர்ச்சியாக நம்ம ஒரு வாரம் செஞ்சுக்கிட்டு இருந்தோம்னா அந்த குறள் சொல்லக்கூடிய செய்தி, அதற்கு தகுந்த மூச்சு பயிற்சி, இது எல்லாமே நம்ம மனசில் தங்கும். அதுக்கு அடுத்து அற்றது அறிந்து கடைபிடித்து மாறல்ல துய்க்க துவர பசித்து என்று ஒரு குறள் வருகிறது என்றால் அதற்கு தகுந்த மாதிரியான ஒரு மூச்சு பயிற்சி. அதே மாதிரி அளவறிந்து உண்பான்கண் இன்பம் போன்று நிற்கும் கழிபேர் இறையான்கண்